2 more in, 2 more out, and 3-way ties for Wild Card 2 in both conferences. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shift for Friday, April 3rd, 2026. Vic and Neil taking you into the first weekend of the month and only 14 shopping days left in the regular season.
14 days to get the wins you need in order to make Lord Stanley's playoffs.
Let's get right to it. Clinchers. The Minnesota Wild become the third team from the Central Division to get in, joining the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. They get in Thursday with a 5-2 win over the Vancouver Canucks. And earlier in the evening, the Carolina Hurricanes became the first team from the Eastern Conference to get in with a convincing 5-1 win over the Columbus Blue Jackets, holding the Jackets to only 10 shots on goal the entire game, although the Blue Jackets did have 21 shots blocked and missed the net on 15 other occasions. But on the flip side of the coin, Neil, we say goodbye to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are eliminated in a 4-1 loss in San Jose on Thursday, and the Chicago Blackhawks, who lost in Edmonton 3-1. So 3 out of the 4 teams that are waiting till next year officially are original 6 clubs. The Rangers, of course, the third of those clubs, and the Vancouver Canucks, the other team out.
Yeah, 3 original 6. Half the original 6 is already eliminated. The biggest shocker, if you were away for the whole season and came back today, would be that Toronto was eliminated. That's hard to imagine, but you'll have another shocker coming up if you were away all season very soon when the Florida Panthers get eliminated.
By our show on Monday, in all likelihood. But going back to the Maple Leafs, now Keith Pelly can put in a call to Chris Drury, and the two of them can decide the retool rebuild debate.
Yeah, and they can also decide what data-centric stuff they need and what analytics they need and how they can judge hockey players based upon not really watching them with their own eyes. Just take a look at an analysis someplace, and I'm sure you'll put a great team out there on the ice.
Well, let's move on to better clubs, at least for this season. And we're going to talk some wild card. We're going to bake in a little bit of schedule data in here as well. Talk about data-centric. How about that? Boston remains wild card 1. Despite their loss in Florida on Thursday, they have 94 points. But now this is where it really gets interesting because there is a 3-way tie in terms of points for that second wild card position. The Ottawa Senators moved from wild card 3 to wild card 2 with a 4-1 win over the Buffalo Sabres, and that prevented Buffalo from clinching their first playoff berth in 15 years. The Senators have 88 points, and they're listed as wild card 2 because they own the regulation tiebreaker over the 2 teams that they are tied with, Detroit and Columbus. The Senators have 33 regulation wins, Detroit 29, and Columbus 27. An outstanding job by Travis Green, getting this team to this point with a completely depleted defense. Tyler Kleven went out last night, and they've got 5 defensemen out now, and you have to wonder whether or not Wade Redden or Chris Phillips or Zdeno Chara are going to be next up on their depth chart.
Or Brian Berard, for that matter. Their schedule is, they have 2 back-to-backs left, of which it starts on Saturday and Sunday, playing Minnesota and then Carolina at home, both of those in Ottawa. They stay at home to play against the 2 Florida teams that week, Tampa Bay and then the Panthers. And then they go into the New York metro area and play at the Islanders and then at the Devils in a back-to-back. Finish off their season with their cross-province rival, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Let's move to Detroit because they bump up from wild card 4 to wild card 3 with a 4-2 win in Philadelphia. Big game there. Alex DeBrincat with 2 goals. Patrick Kane, a goal and 2 assists. John Gibson had a strong night in net. The Wings are only 2 4-0 in their last 6, but somehow are now part of this cluster.
Yes, they certainly are. And if you take a look at Detroit's schedule going forward, too, they are at the Rangers on Saturday. They come home to play against the Minnesota Wild on Sunday. That's a back-to-back, obviously. Then they stay at home to play against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the New Jersey Devils. And their last 2 games of the regular season are in Florida, the first one being in Tampa, the second one being against the Panthers, and that's their final game.
Let's hit the Columbus Blue Jackets. They dropped from wild card 2 to wild card 4 with that loss in Carolina, as we mentioned earlier, only getting those 10 shots on goal. And things appear to have flattened out for Rick Bowness's Chargers because they are 0-4-1 in their last 5.
They are, and they haven't looked like the same team. However, maybe what could motivate them is to get their coach a win against his old team, and that could come as early as Saturday when the Winnipeg Jets go into Columbus to play against the Blue Jackets. Columbus then has a couple of days off before they travel to Detroit, play the Red Wings in an all-important game. 2 days later, they travel into Western New York and play the Buffalo Sabres in a very important game. And after that, go up to La Belle Province and play the Montreal Canadiens before flying right back and having the Boston Bruins in their building on a back-to-back. They finish the season against the Great Eight and the Washington Capitals at home.
We just talked about Detroit winning in Philadelphia, and the Flyers remain in wild card 5 after that loss. They have now dropped 2 straight after that 12-3-1 run. So they trail Ottawa, Detroit, and Columbus by 2 points. The Flyers with 86.
And they have the lowest regulation win total of any of these competing teams. They only have 23 regulation wins. So they have to get a point more than whoever. So they're actually sitting 3 points back if you look at it that way. Their schedule tonight, they go and play at UBS Arena against the New York Islanders. 1 day off, and then they go and play at home in Philadelphia against the Boston Bruins. A day off before they go into New Jersey, then fly to Detroit, then fly up to Winnipeg, Manitoba, come back home to finish their season in a back-to-back scenario against the Hurricanes and then against the Habs in their final game of the season.
I think if they do not come out with 2 points out of UBS Arena on Friday, they will probably lose that path to get into the playoffs, and then it's just going to be a wild card chance for them.
Absolutely, because they're too far back. And this is the one thing that gets a little bit confusing unless you're looking at it on paper. Remember that the Bruins, Senators, and Red Wings can only move up if the Montreal Canadiens falter. They can't move up, obviously, into the Metro division. And for those Metro teams that are down trying to get into the wild card spots, being Columbus and Philadelphia, and for that matter, if you want to keep including Washington, they have to jump over those teams basically and jump above the Islanders to get in there. So it's tough. You got to win your games. Philadelphia, if they lose at UBS Arena and come out of there with nothing, that's a big hole. Now they're just clawing to try to get into the 8th spot, and that's the only thing they can get in.
By the way, Montreal's not falling back.
No, I don't think they are either. I didn't say they were, but they're not in the same division. A lot of people confuse that. They see teams gaining points. For example, the Boston Bruins are 5 points ahead of the Islanders, and yet they're in a wild card spot, and the Islanders are in third in their division because they're in separate divisions. So my point is that you can only climb up within your own division.
One other team that we'll mention, and I think we're just doing it as a courtesy because they won the Eastern Conference in terms of the regular season last year, and that was the Washington Capitals, who stay in wild card 6 after losing 7-3 in New Jersey. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, 5 points apiece. Caps, 85 points, but they only have 6 games left, and they have 4 teams that they're going to have to jump. I just don't see this.
I don't either, and they only have two more games left at the Capital One Arena, that being against Buffalo Sabres, who are not an easy win, and then they play against one of their rivals, Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, that being the second of a back-to-back scenario with that team where they go into Pittsburgh and then come home to play Pittsburgh.
Western Wild Card. Let's go to Wild Card 1 first. And that's the Utah Mammoth, and they extend their hold. It's now 5 points that they are clear of a spot. After a 6-2 win in Seattle on Thursday, the Mammoth spotted the Kraken a 2-0 lead in the first period, came back, got the last 6 goals of the game. Logan Cooley, Dylan Guenther with 3 points apiece. Mammoth have 84 points. And as we've continued to see, this is the one team that truly looks like they have the 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back. But this club has really matured during the course of this season, and I believe they're going to be qualifying for the playoffs.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind that Utah is in the playoffs for sure. And I think that loss by Seattle at home last night, which puts them 4 points behind the Kings, the Predators, and the Sharks. I think that did a lot of damage to the Seattle Kraken, even though they have 8 games to go.
Let's hit now the 3-way tie in the Western Wild Card for that second spot. The San Jose Sharks moved from Wild Card 3 to Wild Card 2 with a 4-1 win, we said earlier, against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Sharks have 4 straight wins after an 0-5-1 slide, and that comes on the heels of a dramatic win against Anaheim on Wednesday in a game that Macklin Celebrini had 4 points. The Sharks were trailing by a goal with 1:39 left when Celebrini tied it, and then Alex Wenberg won the game with just 31 seconds left in regulation. Will Smith also had a goal and 2 assists in that game. This is a club that has so much exuberance. There is so much excitement going on in the Shark Tank now. And this was a feel-good story for a long time. And then Sharks hit the skids. But because nobody was really able to draw off, they have gotten hot now. And now they are the team that is being chased.
They are, but they got a big game coming up on Saturday that will be at home against the Nashville Predators, who just beat in a shootout the LA Kings last night. So that's going to be a big one. As far as their schedule goes, the San Jose Sharks play the next 4 of their 5 games at home. They play, as I said, Nashville Saturday. They play Chicago Blackhawks at home. Then they play the Edmonton Oilers. And then on a back-to-back, after the Edmonton game, they fly to Anaheim to play the Ducks. Then they come home, play the Vancouver Canucks in their final home game, then go 3 on the road, Nashville, and then a back-to-back being in Chicago and then in Winnipeg. And that finishes off the Sharks' regular season.
They're listed as Wild Card 2, even though they have 79 points, along with Nashville and Los Angeles, and that is by virtue of having played 1 fewer game than the Predators and the Kings. So the Preds move from Wild Card 4 to Wild Card 3. You just noted the shootout win that the Preds had on Thursday in LA. They actually led this game 4-1. The Kings were able to tie this game in the third period before the Predators prevailed in a shootout. Luke Evangelista scored the only goal in the shootout at the end of round 8. Took 16 shots for 1 goal to get in. So the Preds in Wild Card 3, they're up on the Kings by virtue of having a 25-19 edge in regulation wins. So you look at Los Angeles here, who dropped from Wild Card 2 to Wild Card 4. Even though they beat St. Louis in overtime on Wednesday on a goal by Trevor Moore, that RW column is a big problem because they are going to have to win outright against either San Jose or Nashville.
But the good news for the LA Kings is they have the most favorable schedule of anybody fighting to get into the Western Wild Card. They start off with a game tomorrow against the Toronto Maple Leafs, who just lost to San Jose. They then welcome back the Nashville Predators again, having just lost to them in a shootout last night. Then they welcome in the Vancouver Canucks, who are last in the entire league, before they play their nemesis, the Edmonton Oilers. That game also in LA. They finished their season with 3 road games in 4 nights, but they're all against non-playoff teams. They're at Seattle, right away go to Vancouver the next night and play them. And then in their 3rd game in 4 nights, they end their season in Calgary against the Flames. So they really don't have horribly hard opponents the way that Nashville does, but you got to win your games.
3, 4, and 5 points behind San Jose, Nashville, and Los Angeles are the Winnipeg Jets with 76. They dropped a 3-0 game in Dallas on Thursday. Jake Ottinger with a 22-save shutout. We're going to talk a little bit more about the end of that game towards the end of the show. Behind them, we mentioned Seattle losing that devastating loss, 6-2 against Utah on Thursday. The Kraken now 3-9-2 in their last 14. Remember, they were in 3rd place in the Pacific at the Olympic break. And finally, because he's a friend of the show, Jim Montgomery, we will talk St. Louis Blues. They remain in wildcard 7, but with only 74 points after losing in Los Angeles in overtime on Wednesday. You got anything that jumps off the page at you with any of those 3 teams with their schedules, or should we move on?
I don't think that those 3 are really in the battle at this point, and Winnipeg's just hanging on to stay in the battle. I think we should just move on. I'd love to say that St. Louis was in it, but with 74 points, I really can't say that they are. They're in Anaheim tonight, as you know, to play against the Ducks, and I don't give them much hope now.
The Ducks, who blew that game against the San Jose Sharks on Wednesday night. So let's incorporate them into this, that they are still in first technically in the Pacific. They have 87 points. So do the Edmonton Oilers, but the Ducks have played 1 fewer game, so they still hold that position. But the Oilers, now with 5 consecutive wins, they had the 3-1 win over Chicago on Thursday. And in those 5 wins, Neil, Oilers have given up only 8 goals. So here we go again. And it seems like we have seen this movie before with Edmonton, where late in the season, things start to fall into place. Of course, the weakness of the Pacific all season has probably helped them into a position that they can actually finish first in the Pacific and be the 2nd seed after a very mediocre season for large stretches of the year.
And they don't have Leon Draisaitl for the rest of the regular season, too, and yet they seem to be turning it around. We just don't know which team we're going to get when we watch Edmonton. Are you going to get that dominant superstar-studded team, or are you going to get the one that goes out and falls flat on their face? You never know. But the Edmonton Oilers have a way to win the pathetic division for sure. They entertain the Vegas Golden Knights on Saturday. Then they travel to Utah to play against the Mammoth, and then travel out to the West Coast to play the San Jose Sharks. 2 nights off, and then they play the Kings at Crypto.com Arena before coming home and facing the mighty Avalanche, and a couple of days off before they finish it off with the lowly Vancouver Canucks.
One of the things that is starting to help the Oilers now is they are beginning to get secondary scoring, and Matt Savoy now up to 15 goals on the season. So if they can get secondary, tertiary scoring and not having to depend on McDavid, Draisaitl when he gets back, Zach Hyman, then this can go a long way to really carving a path for the Oilers right to the Western Conference Final again.
They can. It is possible again, and part of it is due to the weakness of their division. It has been very soft this year. So, yes, Edmonton could pull it off again if they wake up and keep going.
You want to hit the Anaheim schedule before we move on to Vegas?
Certainly, Anaheim has a game tonight. We've already mentioned it against the St. Louis Blues. Tomorrow night, the Calgary Flames come burning into the Honda Center to play against the Ducks. And then they have a couple of days off before the Nashville Predators come in. And then they have a night off and face the San Jose Sharks again at home. 2 days off before the Vancouver Canucks come into the Honda Center. By my count, that's 5 straight home games. And then they go out on the road for 2. And they go into St. Paul to play the Minnesota Wild. 2 nights later, they end their regular season in Smashville, Music City, against the Nashville Predators.
They control their own destiny, so let's see how well they bounce back starting on Friday from that loss on Wednesday in San Jose. So the Golden Knights are third with 84 points. They win 6-3 against Calgary on Thursday. They trailed 3 different times in this game before scoring 3 in the third. Mitch Marner with his 4th career hat trick, and he added 2 assists. Guess who played goal in this game for the Vegas Golden Knights?
Carter Hart.
First game since January 8th when he was injured against Columbus. And you have to remember now that he played parts of a couple of seasons for John Tortorella in Philadelphia. Given the relationship between the two, that if Hart stays healthy, he could usurp Adin Hill and be the number 1 guy if and when the Golden Knights secure a playoff berth.
Absolutely. I mean, you wonder if Carter Hart and John Tortorella have had a conversation about how the Philadelphia Flyers cut him loose when he was in that legal trouble. But now they're together, and you're absolutely right. If they have the right mojo between each other, you could see Carter Hart be the number 1 guy. The good news for John Tortorella, Carter Hart, and the rest of the Vegas Golden Knights is that they do not have a back-to-back game left. They play in Edmonton on Saturday, 2 days off before they go to British Columbia to play Vancouver, a day off before they go down to Washington to play the Seattle Kraken, a day off before they fly to Denver to play the Colorado Avalanche, and then they come back to Sin City for their last 2 games, which are against Winnipeg, and then they end the season at home against Seattle. No back-to-backs. 4 non-playoff teams at this moment and 2 playoff teams at this moment in their 6 remaining games.
Be interesting to see how Torts splits his goaltending up. And just to follow up on what you had just said, evidently Torts and Hart have had numerous conversations, so he's going to support his goaltender, and now we'll see how he plays down the stretch. But I don't think that Vegas is out of some of their doldrums. I mean, they trailed, like I said before, 3 times in this game. And on average, as we discussed with George McPhee and Wraparound on Wednesday, they trail more on average per game than any team in the NHL except the Vancouver Canucks. They were very sloppy in the neutral zone. They had a turnover that ended up in a goal. They had 2 bad pinches, and all 3 goals were on odd man rushes. So that is kind of the antithesis of what Torts wants to see. And that part really needs to get cleaned up.
It does, and John will do that, I'm sure. He will get that cleaned up and get them going into the playoffs, in a disciplined way. None of this is meant to say that Bruce Cassidy didn't have them disciplined or that Bruce Cassidy did anything wrong for that matter, as George McPhee made sure that he emphasized to us. It's just that they needed a new voice in there, and this is why they had turned to John Tortorella.
For those that managed to stay up for this game, I'll raise my hand. There was a 44-minute intermission in between the second and third periods because of an ice issue. Normally the intermissions are 18 minutes, and it took them almost a half hour to get this remedied so they could play the third period last night. So additional hijinks and fun at T-Mobile Arena. Let's hit the Atlantic and the Central divisions really quickly. We'll start in the Atlantic, where Tampa Bay moves past Buffalo with their win against the Pittsburgh Penguins, 6-3 on Thursday, and that was coupled with the Sabres' loss in Ottawa. Both have 100 points. The Lightning have played 75 games, and the Sabres 76, and those teams have one more game against each other. But right behind them, Mr. Smith, the Montreal Canadiens, they get a 3-2 win at Madison Square Garden. Cole Caulfield, his second goal of the game and his 49th of the season with 5:05 left. The Habs have ripped off 7 consecutive wins, and they are only 2 points behind both the Lightning and the Sabres.
But their schedule doesn't get real easy. They played, as you said, last night at Madison Square Garden and eked out a 3-2 win. They go across the Hudson River tomorrow and play against the New Jersey Devils, and then after the game fly back home with the Devils trailing behind them to face them in a back-to-back. So that'll be 3 games in 4 nights for La Habitante. And then 2 nights later, the Florida Panthers come into the Bell Center. 2 nights after that, the Tampa Bay Lightning come into the Bell Center. 2 nights after that, the Columbus Blue Jackets come in. And after that game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Habs get on their plane and fly to New York and play against the New York Islanders in a back-to-back. That's it for the Habs, except for a trip down the New Jersey Turnpike to play against the Philadelphia Flyers to end their season on April 14th. But you got to say, Vic, what a season for the Canadiens, that they're going to end up over 100 points. You know, according to Keith Pelly at his press conference, he didn't see this coming. He didn't see Montreal getting so good so fast. I guess because he wasn't looking, but he says he didn't see it.
Yeah, this just in. They did make the playoffs last year.
Yeah, they do have some guy named Caulfield that's come up that's pretty good, I hear, and some others. So I don't
Suzuki,
know where he was watching.
Hudson. I mean, you can go on. And if that goaltending holds up between Jakub Dovish and Jacob Fowler, that's the club with the proverbial nobody wants to see this team in the playoffs.
It is. And going back to stable ownership, Jeff Molson hired Gorton to come in after he was let go by the Rangers. And then Jeff Molson and Jeff Gorton hired Kent Hughes to come in and be the general manager of the team because he speaks French. And they've done a great job. They've been stable, and they have a real good product now, and there's excitement in Montreal, and so there should be.
Marty St. Louis also doing a real terrific job, literally growing into that role behind the Canadiens bench. Metropolitan Division really quickly, and the Carolina Hurricanes with 102 points, actually number 1 in the Eastern Conference right now. Pittsburgh, despite their loss, hold on to second with 92 points. And the New York Islanders, despite losses against the Penguins and the Sabres on Monday and Tuesday night, still hold on to third with 89 points.
And the New York Islanders schedule, just because they're one of the teams competing, they have 2 more back-to-backs to go. It all starts tonight when they play at home against the Philadelphia Flyers and then get on a plane and go to Raleigh, North Carolina to play against the Hurricanes. They then have off until next Thursday when they play against the Toronto Maple Leafs in their own building. Then Ottawa comes in, and then in a back-to-back home games, Montreal comes in the very next night. They then have 1 day off before they play their last game of the season, and that's a home game against the visiting Carolina Hurricanes. Not an easy schedule, Vic, if you think about it. 2 games against Carolina, Ottawa, Montreal. And maybe the only gimme would be the Toronto Maple Leafs in that midweek game. But they do not have an easy schedule coming down the pike.
The one break they may catch in this is if Carolina should wrap up the Eastern Conference, possibility that they may sit players in that finale.
Yeah, but you know how I feel about that. I don't think that's right, and I think the league should step in and not allow you to do that if you're playing against a team that's still competing to try to get into the playoffs. I just don't think it's right. But you are right. They may do that.
It's not often I'm right.
No, it isn't. But this one you are.
All right. Good for me. Central Division, Colorado 108, Dallas 102, Minnesota 96, 1, 2, 3. Don't expect any movement there. So I think that's a pretty thorough recap of everything that you need to know going into this weekend and setting up the last 2 weeks of the regular season schedule. Nathan MacKinnon on Wednesday night became the first player in the NHL to score 50 goals this season in an 8-6 loss by the Avalanche to the Vancouver Canucks. They scored 9 goals against Calgary on Monday and then turn around and give up 8 to Vancouver. The Avalanche were actually down 6-2 in this game, came back to tie it, only to surrender the lead 23 seconds later on a goal by Marcus Pettersson, who had only 1 goal all season. And that game-winning goal came with just 5:39 left in regulation. What a mess that was.
It sure was. And you know what? They had the Quebec Nordique uniforms on in that game, and they looked like some of those Quebec Nordique teams.
Well, we're going to talk about that right at the end of the show, a little bit of fodder for the weekend for our listeners. But at this point, no doubt that MacKinnon is going to be among the finalists for the Hart Trophy. And Macklin Celebrini's name was mentioned a lot during the first half of the season when the Sharks were right in the playoff hunt, and then they went into this slide. Celebrini's numbers fell off, but now he has come on again, and he trails only Wayne Gretzky for having the most games as a teenager with at least 3+ points. Celebrini has done it 17 times this year. Wayne Gretzky in 1979-80 has that mark at 19, and it's certainly possible that Celebrini could pass that this year. So the definition of the Hart Trophy is the player that is most valuable to his team. So you've got MacKinnon, who plays on a loaded Colorado team. Granted, he is the best player, but he's got an amazing supporting cast there. And Celebrini is leading a team that was expected to make strides this season, but not be a playoff team, and they might be.
I think that Celebrini will be on the dance card for the MVP trophy, probably along with Nikita Kucherov and obviously Nate MacKinnon. But when it comes to the MVP award, your team has to have some success in order for your success to be of as much value. So I don't think Celebrini will win this year. I think he will in the future, but I don't think he will win it this year. And you've got to take into consideration, too, that it's really true that the West Coast teams, the California teams, don't get the scrutiny that the Colorado Avalanche get. More people, more eyeballs, more media sees the Avalanche games than sees the San Jose games. For this year, anyways, I think Celebrini's going to make a case, but I don't think ultimately he'll do it.
I think if they get in, I think he's got a very good chance because this should be relative based on expectation. And the expectation...
It's not, though.
But the expectation for the Sharks was considerably lower than that of either the Colorado Avalanche that have MacKinnon or the Tampa Bay Lightning that have Kucherov.
They are, but that's not the way they vote. So it doesn't really matter that you think that. That's not the way they vote. They vote for the guys that teams really do well, and they're the best guy on the team. The best guy on the team that squeaks into the playoffs, they don't get the MVP award. You can go back through the history of the award. It doesn't happen.
I believe Al Rollins, Chicago Blackhawks goalie, won it once, and the Blackhawks were last in the league.
What century are you talking about?
Last.
You're talking about 1940 something?
I think like 50s, like 54.
Yeah, you're comparing the 50s to 2026. Come on.
Just thought I'd drop that little matzo ball in there. Okay, here we go. I mentioned earlier that we were going to come back to the end of the Winnipeg-Dallas game played on Thursday. Elias Salamonson of the Winnipeg Jets now in concussion protocol due to a high reverse hit that was issued by Jason Robertson of the Stars in the second period. And then the retribution that followed in the third was that Jets defenseman Neil Pionk tried to low bridge Robertson at center ice. He was then encountered by Colin Blackwell. And before this all settled down, the two captains, Jamie Benn of the Stars and Adam Lowry of the Jets, ended up in a fight. So plenty of hard feelings and some bad blood between those teams.
And, these are two of the top teams in the league last season. The Jets have fallen from grace this season, but they're still very competitive on the ice, and they still want to get into the playoffs. If they judge that one of theirs had a dirty hit, then they're going to go to his aid. But it's not often that you see two captains fighting. And Jamie Benn, remember, does not wear a shield. So he's one of the very few in the league, along with Ryan O'Reilly and Ryan Reeves, and just a couple of others whose names are not even coming to me right now, that do not wear a shield because they're grandfathered into not having to wear one.
A lot of bad blood coming out of that game. So we'll see if Salamonson is okay. Quick personnel notes. Brandon Hagel for the Tampa Bay Lightning did not play in the win against Pittsburgh. Undisclosed injury. He is listed as day-to-day. Justin Falk for the Red Wings left in the second period. Their win against the Flyers, lower body injury. Jack McBain, lower body injury, left in the second period of the Mammoth win in Seattle. We'd mentioned earlier that Tyler Clevin went out in the first period of the Senators' win against the Buffalo Sabres. He took a puck up high coming off the stick of Tage Thompson. But one return that was notable, Tyson Foerster came back in the loss for the Flyers against the Red Wings. He'd missed 49 games with an arm injury suffered on December 1st. You remember that one, Neil, where he took a one-timer and just collapsed and went right off the ice?
Yeah, and it looked like a shoulder dislocation or shoulder something. I remember it, yeah.
Feel good ending to this, not on the score sheet, but Foerster did score the Flyers' first goal of the game. And a little fodder to send you off into the weekend. And earlier, Neil, you had mentioned that the Colorado Avalanche were wearing the jerseys of the Quebec Nordiques, where that franchise had originated from. And they wore them in that loss to the Vancouver Canucks. But when I watch the Avalanche in Nordique uniforms, the team doesn't appear as good. They don't appear as fast. They don't appear as explosive. And I wanted to ask you whether you see it the same way I do, that when teams go to these alternate uniforms, like the Carolina Hurricanes do with the Hartford Whalers. And I'm not talking about necessarily the Minnesota Wild, where they're still wearing green, even when they wear an alternate uniform that resembles that of the Minnesota North Stars. But when you have like these drastic changes where these teams go back and they honor their past, just the way it hits my eyes, it hits my brain. They just don't look like the same club.
No, and you're absolutely right. There's very few teams in the league that wear a totally different uniform ever in their games. And the Colorado Avalanche wear the entire uniform of the Quebec Nordiques sometimes. And the Carolina Hurricanes will wear the entire uniform of the Hartford Whalers. The other team that I can't get my head straight around is the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are obviously blue and white. That's their colors.
Yeah.
On St. Patrick's Day, they come out with green and white. And they wear Toronto St. Pat's uniforms, which is the name of the team before it was the Maple Leafs. And it's really hard to get used to seeing these Maple Leaf players in green. I think that the colors of the team are so important to the fans, to the people that are looking on. One of the things that's really cool about when you see a player get traded or a player signs with a new team is your imagination saying, gosh, I wonder how he'll look in a Montreal uniform. I wonder how he'll look in a Bruins uniform. I wonder how he'll look in this and that. So, yes, when I see these teams and they come out in something completely different from head to toe, I'm like, oh, is that the same guys? I see number 88, which is Neckesh for the Colorado Avalanche, wearing the Nordiques uniform, and I think it's Joe Sakic. because, as you know, he wore number 88 before he got number 19. It's amazing what your eyes will do and how your brain processes these things. But I agree with you. I don't see the same team. I really got to concentrate, and then I go, oh, okay, that's William Nylander with a green helmet on.
So I'm not nuts.
No, you're right on the money.
I thought you were going to tell me that I am, but okay, no. I'll take your answer there. Let's look at the weekend very quickly before we wrap up. Friday, only 2 games, Philadelphia at the New York Islanders and St. Louis at Anaheim. On Saturday, 15 games, but most notably, Neil, Brent Burns will play his 1,000th consecutive game when the Avalanche visit the Dallas Stars. He will finish, in all likelihood, this regular season with 1,007. Phil Kessel has the all-time record of consecutive games at 1,064. But boy, this is really some sort of milestone.
It's amazing. And I would be surprised, knowing Brent Burns, seeing him play this year. I think he'll play again next year, and he will eclipse Phil Kessel's 1,064.
The guy is a specimen.
For sure.
7 games on Sunday, and that will wrap up the weekend, and we'll rejoin you again with short shifts on Monday. But remember to reach us individually at neil@nhlwraparound.com or vic@nhlwraparound.com. We are on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. Leave a review or subscribe if you are tuning in on YouTube. Our 2 latest subscribers, Jake Frappier and Vinny Chartik. Thank you for joining our YouTube family. You can also find us on X, Instagram, TikTok, and at ray8.tv. Our website is nhlwraparound.com. Patrick Hoffman has written New York-centric for us all year. We also have sPix appearing on audio as well.
And the sPix last night. 9 wins, 5 losses. 9 right, 5 wrong. We'll continue with only 2 predictions for tonight, and then we'll have all 15 tomorrow.
And 7 on Sunday. Final note on our spring cleanings, we will be doing the Chicago Blackhawks and Toronto Maple Leafs on Monday on short shifts. But a reminder that beyond that, there are still 12 teams that are going to be eliminated, and we don't have enough shows to wrap them up during the course of the regular season. So if teams are eliminated and they don't appear on short shifts or NHL Wraparound, we will be releasing them individually as quick takes. So stay tuned for those, and teams that are eliminated during the course of the Stanley Cup playoffs will be included during our Stanley Cup date shows, which will begin in about 2 weeks and change.
And that's going to be a lot of fun. We're really looking forward to it, but we got a great competition between now and then to see who's going to be in those Stanley Cup dates, and it's a great time for hockey.
Enjoy all the games this weekend. We'll speak to you on Monday.